We
The
need to
first time I
establish
set foot on the
communication
capital
right
planet
now,
of Zithra,
or this
I
ends
almost didn't
badly for
survive the
both of
customs
us.
check. My mission was simple, at least on paper.
I never thought I'd
Act as
see
a
one of you up
diplomatic
close.
liaison between Earth and
But
Zithra's
I am
ruling
not
council.
afraid of you.
In practice,
What happens
it was
next
more like
is
walking
up to
into a
you.
lion's den wearing neon-colored pajamas. The Zytherians were notoriously cautious with humans, partly because of our unpredictable emotional volatility, and partly because humans had a nasty reputation for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. I thought I was prepared. I had memorized protocol, memorized greetings, and even memorized the exact tone of voice deemed acceptable by Zytherian etiquette experts. But nothing could have prepared me for Queen Selira. The first time I saw her, she was seated on a throne of crystallized obsidian, a throne that shimmered with 1,000 hues, shifting colors with every subtle movement of the room's lighting. Her skin wasn't like anything on Earth. It was a translucent violet, glimmering faintly like starlight trapped beneath the surface. Her eyes were enormous, almost terrifyingly so, with irises that seemed to contain entire galaxies. And she was smiling. Not a polite, ceremonial smile, but a smile that suggested she knew secrets no one else did. Secrets about the universe, about me, maybe even about my lunch plans for the week. The gods flanking her, tall, armored, faceless creatures whose movements were disturbingly precise, stiffened the instant I entered. I tried to bow. I tried to nod respectfully. I tried to remind myself that I was a trained diplomat and that panic was unbecoming. Human, Queen Selira said, her voice smooth and melodic, like 1,000 chimes ringing in harmony. Welcome to Zithra. You may rise. I rose. My knees nearly gave out. My throat went dry. My entire brain short-circuited in the space of half a second. And then it happened. I looked at her, really looked, and without thinking, without any sort of internal editor catching me, I blurted, "You're cute." There was silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel like the universe itself is holding its breath. One of the guards gasped. A very audible, "Gah!" And then another. And I swear if I squinted, I could see the third guard's armor almost vibrate with shock. Queen Selira, however, just smiled. Not the polite, distant smile of a ruler tolerating a minor faux pas. Not the sharp, predatory smile of a queen who was deciding whether or not to execute you for your insolence. Just a smile that seemed to say, "Well, that's refreshing." "You," she paused, and the tilt of her head suggested amusement, curiosity, even delight. "You called me cute?" I swallowed hard. My tongue felt like it weighed 10 kilograms. I didn't mean. I was trying to. "You meant it," she said, finishing my sentence for me. She leaned slightly forward, and the light from the throne caught her skin in a way that made it glow. "I like honesty. It's rare among your kind." The guard stiffened again, as if my survival depended on me not saying another word. But Queen Selira waved them off with a hand that seemed too delicate to hold the authority she radiated. "Let him speak." I blinked. Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm Dr. Elias Varn, diplomat from Earth. And I promise I. She held up a hand, silencing me. "Do not recite your credentials. We already know who you are. I am interested in you, not the bureaucracy that sent you." It was the most terrifying, and simultaneously exhilarating, thing anyone had ever said to me. Over the next few days, I was shown the wonders of Zithra. Floating gardens that defied gravity, rivers that shimmered with liquid light, and cities built from materials that seemed alive, responding subtly to the emotions of the citizens. Yet nothing compared to my interactions with the Queen. Every meeting began with protocol and ended with laughter. Real, unguarded laughter. Sometimes she asked about human customs. Sometimes she simply stared at me in that way, as if trying to read my very thoughts. And I, thankfully, had learned the lesson that honesty, while dangerous, could be a bridge. One evening, after a particularly grueling session of diplomatic negotiations, I found myself walking beside her in the palace gardens. The air was thick with bioluminescent pollen that shimmered like tiny stars. The guards followed at a discreet distance. "You humans are curious," she said, her voice soft in the quiet night. "I could say the same about Zytherians," I replied. "Your planet. It's beautiful. And your people. You're unlike anything I imagined." She paused. "And yet you still called me cute." I swallowed. I couldn't help it. "You have this presence. And I guess in some absurd human way, I wanted to say it out loud. Queen Selira laughed. A sound so pure, so unrestrained, that even the glowing pollen seemed to pause midair to listen. You are bold, human. Bold and unpredictable. We walked in silence for a while, the only sound the faint hum of the energy fields that protected the gardens. Then she stopped and turned to me. Elias, do you know why my guards reacted so strongly when you called me cute? I shook my head. I can guess, but it is dangerous to speak casually to the ruler of Zithara, she explained. To admit any personal opinion, to break the ritualistic barriers, is unconventional. In our history, such moments often led to rebellion or assassination. Your words, light, human, and completely reckless, have created a ripple. A ripple I find delightful. I wanted to ask what that meant for me. I wanted to ask if my career, and my life, was now in jeopardy. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, silently acknowledging that I had just made the most dangerous, and perhaps most memorable compliment of my life. Over the following week, my relationship with Queen Selira became increasingly unusual. We met under the guise of diplomacy, yet most conversations drifted into realms far beyond politics. She told me stories of her youth, of battles fought in the void between stars, of alliances forged and broken. I shared stories of Earth, the mundane and the magnificent alike. One afternoon, the Queen invited me to the observation hall, a massive dome that overlooked Zithara's binary suns. The air shimmered with the heat of the twin stars, and the floors were transparent, giving the sensation of walking on light. Elias, she said, her eyes reflecting the suns above. There is a ceremony tonight. A bonding ritual. It is rare for a human to be invited. I tried to maintain my composure. I'm honored, Your Majesty. She smirked, a subtle tilt of the head. I suspect you think this is about diplomacy. It is not. It is about understanding. Connection. The ritual itself was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Citizens of Zithara gathered in concentric circles, singing in harmonies that vibrated through the air, resonating with the very molecules around us. And at the center, Queen Selira stood, radiant, commanding, and impossibly alive. As I approached, she reached out a hand. Not in command, but in invitation. The gesture was simple, yet profound. I placed my hand in hers, and in that moment, I felt the currents of Zithara itself, subtle streams of energy that intertwined with my own. You humans are fascinating, she whispered. You speak, you stumble, you err. And yet, some of you see the beauty in things we consider perilous. That is why I smiled when you called me cute. That is why I allowed it. I realized then that my impulsive words had done more than break protocol. They had opened a door. And as the stars of Zithara's twin suns bathed us in gold and violet light, I understood that the bridge between our worlds was no longer built on politics, treaties, or fear. It was built on honesty. That night, after the ceremony, we stood alone on the observation deck. The city below twinkled like a galaxy in miniature. You are brave, Queen Selira said softly, to speak what you feel, knowing the risks. I didn't even think, I admitted. I just said it. And somehow it worked. She smiled, tilting her head in a way that made the starlight catch her translucent skin. Sometimes, the most dangerous words are the truest. You have a gift, Elias. The ability to be reckless and sincere. Perhaps in time, we will see what that truly means. Over the months that followed, I continued my diplomatic work, but the dynamic between Selira and me remained exceptional. There were whispers among the guards, cautious admiration mixed with incredulity. Other diplomats gave me wary glances, unsure whether to emulate my candor or distance themselves from it. And Queen Selira? She continued to smile. Always a little more openly when I entered a room, always a little more personal in our conversations. One day, as we walked through the palace gardens, she stopped beneath a tree whose leaves shimmered like liquid silver. She turned to me, her expression unreadable, yet inviting. Elias, she said, it is rare for one of your kind to understand the balance between risk and truth. Rare for one to survive the consequences unscathed. Rare for one to inspire me. My heart skipped. Inspire you? I asked, trying not to sound like a foolish human. She nodded. Yes. You remind me that even in a world governed by precision and ritual, spontaneity. Honest, fearless spontaneity has value. And perhaps, necessity. I swallowed. So, calling you cute. It wasn't just a disaster waiting to happen? Queen Selira laughed softly, the sound like chimes in a gentle wind. On the contrary, human. It was the beginning of something far more interesting than mere protocol. And so it began. A partnership, a bond, and a friendship that defied expectation. I survived the initial shock of my blunder, and in doing so, learned a profound lesson. Sometimes, the bravest act isn't in strategy, treaties, or even survival. Sometimes the bravest act is in the simple truth. The act of looking someone in the eyes and speaking what you feel. Even if that someone is an alien queen whose guards gasp in horror at your words. By the time I left Zithara, I was no longer just a human diplomat. I was someone who had glimpsed a truth few had. That courage, honesty, and a touch of recklessness could bridge worlds. And somewhere in the heart of a violet-skinned queen, I knew I had left more than words behind. I had left a mark. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and often incomprehensible. But for the first time, I understood that connection, real, fearless connection, could light the darkness in ways politics never could. And if that connection began with a single foolish word, cute, then perhaps the universe itself had a sense of humor after all.